Okay. So thank you, everybody, for taking your time to join us today. I appreciate we're hitting the lunchtime, and obviously, it's been an extremely busy week and a busy month for accountants and businesses alike. This is the first session that we have created for our advisors. The purpose of this session is to truly give you insights from the experts. The experts being our team within Swoop on this session, but we will, moving forward, be bringing in guests as well, potentially from different sectors. But again, these sessions we genuinely want to be led by you as the advisors, because for us it's so important to ensure that we give you the right messaging and the right insights as to what's going on within the funding world, the wider business communities, so you can then in turn obviously pass this education and information on to your clients. So I'm going to start off the session by running through some introductions, because I'm sure you don't know all four of us. If you may have known one of us on the call, but I will go through introductions. And then, as part of the registration, we did ask if you have any questions, anything you wanted to discuss throughout the session. We have a whole host of those, but also at the same time, massively encourage you to start putting things through. Please, can you put them in the Q&A, because I get lost when it's in the chat. I am a man, I'm trying to multitask whilst recording and also comparing the session. But any questions that you have, we're going to be discussing all things the budget, Brexit, RLS, anything essentially to do with assisting businesses from a funding perspective, but also I guess a general sense as well. So if there's any burning questions you have, please put them in the Q&A. We will make sure that we get round and answer them. If we don't get time in the session, then we will respond with the answers after the session. So I guess as I'm talking, I'll introduce myself first. So my name's Sam Horner. I joined Swoop about 12 weeks ago. I've been in the professional services industry for about 18 years. I know I don't look it, thank you. But my last 7, so I did banking for 10 years, legal for a couple of years, and the last 7 years is working directly with accountants. Through Receipt Bank, or DEX as it is now, but in my mind it's always going to be Receipt Bank. I did about 5 years with them, so saw them from a very, very small startup to obviously the massive beast that they are today. And then my last 2 years working with Futurely, and the 18 months of my 2 years at Futurely was working in partnership with Swoop, and ultimately fell in love with what Swoop are doing. Still working closely with Futurely, but my role is head of the advisor channel. So this is my doing. Hopefully it's a success, but it's about how can we support our accountants and advisors in a much better way, and again understand you and how we can assist you further. So I'm going to shut up now, and I'm going to hand over to Andrea to introduce herself.
Thanks, Sam. So good afternoon, everyone. My name's Andrea Reynolds, and I'm CEO and co-founder of Swoop. My background, I was a chartered accountant with KPMG, left, set up my own corporate finance firm, and it was from that experience that Swoop came to be. The essence of Swoop is around the fact that when I was servicing clients to help them on their fundraising, it became pretty apparent that lending isn't always the answer. A lot of the time it is, but sometimes businesses aren't eligible. Sometimes they need to blend their capital so that they can reduce the cost of their projects. So the difference between Swoop and other peers is that we look at all forms of funding across the landscape. So that is, of course, lending, but also every grant that's available to your clients, and also equity investment, which actually is becoming a major cornerstone of this government's policy, and interesting to see the budget announcements yesterday on that. So we're glad that we're there, ready to deploy and make that effective in terms of the government schemes. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this session, and essentially I wish Swoop existed when I was an accountant in terms of helping to service my clients. So hopefully we can do that for you guys. Thanks.
Fantastic. And Stu, you're at the top of my screen.
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I'm Stuart, Head of Commercial Mortgages and Property Finance at Swoop. My background spans global traditional banks operating primarily in the UK. I've also worked for small niche property lenders in the UK. And the last 7 years of my career, I have worked in the brokerage industry. The reason that the brokerage industry was always attractive to me was it became pretty apparent, having worked just for two banks, one of them the biggest in the world and one of them a relatively small player in the UK market, that I was frustrated by the bank's inability to support SMEs and property professionals, and I didn't like being hamstrung by one criteria from one bank. So the brokerage route always felt a natural route for me. Absolutely love working in the sector, love working with SMEs and property professionals to access finance. I've been with Swoop for, this is my 4th week with the business, where we've come in and we've set up a dedicated property and commercial finance team. And moving forward, looking forward to working with the wider Swoop business and our valued introducers and advisors, such as accountants, to service SMEs and help them access the commercial finance they need.
Fantastic. Thank you, Stu. And Rhys?
Yep. So hi, thanks, Sam. I am head of unsecured and asset finance at Swoop. I've been in the role for the same time as Stuart, coming up to our 4th week now, Stuart, I think. Previous to this, I've worked at a number of different brokerages, specialising within the unsecured and asset market. So typically for SMEs needing kind of finance between kind of 3 months right their way up to kind of 6, 7, potentially 10 years if it's on an asset finance facility. Previously to kind of joining the brokerage world, I worked at 2 banks, pretty similar kind of lending arena, except we had one policy. Now at Swoop we have a full range of policies in terms of whole market access. So from my position as a professional, I'm more suited to kind of find a business within the market funding across the wide range of facilities we have, along with the wide range of lenders that we have, and it's more suited for them from that part. So I head up the team, specialising within the unsecured and asset kind of specialisms, and yeah, we're very well suited in the market to kind of find access to funding for clients. Definitely.
You must be like a kid in the sweet shop now, going from having one policy to go, I don't know, I've got everything. We've got so much to go at now.
I think it makes you think that sometimes that you could be sat here or speaking with one funder, or dealing within one lending panel, but you don't realise quite until you're in the hot seat of 16, 17 probably active funders within one specific parameter for that profile of that client. So whether that fits kind of the year's trading, what they're looking for, etc., and the term, you've really got kind of a broad spectrum of funders to place the requirement with, and making sure the client's really getting the best facility out there in the market, and they're not just strung up with their one lending criteria. And I get quite a lot of clients coming to me then that have actually been to their bank, and they've been rejected, and we've been able to Swoop kind of turn this around and say, well, you've got 3 or 4 different options now. Which one would you prefer to go to? They have, this pros, this cons, early repayments, etc. So it's a much more broader spectrum. And yeah, to answer your question, it's definitely a nicer opportunity to have.
I'll add to that as well, actually, because what was really interesting this morning, we had a call with the fund managers, and what they'll do is talk about potential cases and seeing who the best funders are to work with them and everything. And there was one case that it was a fashion label, and they were looking for some funding. And actually, one of the guys pointed out and said, we've actually got a funder who had a former fashion brand. He funds now, but however, he loves anything to do with fashion. So, having that insight and that information, which actually that's a personal thing that you wouldn't find on a website, that he owned a fashion business and wants to fund fashion. That for me, just, I don't know, that's me promoting Swoop there, but it was just so nice to hear and actually go, wow, we've got an intel on the actual funders as well, not just we know this is their criteria. Actually, we got some real under the skin information from them as well.
I think just on that, Sam, and I was on that call earlier on, I think because of the branding that we do have lenders that are kind of coming to us asking to kind of deal with our clients. So where particularly, other other providers may not have that, that specific lender on board. It just kind of grows with our brand that they're actually knocking on our door, let's say, and seeing, can we kind of work together and ramp up some business? So yeah, it's nice to have.
Fantastic. Well, thank you for those intros, everyone. Hopefully you've got a flavour of the people we've got and the calibre of people we have within the business. Please, as I said earlier, I encourage you to put any questions in, and no question is a silly question, because I tend to ask them on a daily basis from a funding perspective as well, because it's not a world that I fully understand. So it helps me massively. What I will do is I'll start with the questions that we've had come through from the registrants. But as I say, any that you get, and to be honest, I think as we start going, you're probably going to find, oh, actually, yes, I'll ask that question and understand that in a bit more detail. So the original session we were doing was all about RLS. We didn't know when it was going to end. We didn't know, well, we thought it was going to end at the end of the year. So the first question that was asked, and I'll rephrase it now, is now that the RLS is extended, are there any changes? And actually, what does that actually mean to a business? And I'm going to throw this one to you, Rhys, because it probably fits in your arena.
Yeah, no problem. So after the kind of the budget announcement, there was a kind of rumour going around the market that it was going to be extended. Of that, we didn't actually, have it confirmed kind of by the government that basically the guarantee that sits behind the facility, which effectively replaces the ESG scheme, and it is now the revamped from CBILS now to RLS. We then come into kind of what was announced yesterday, that it's going to be extended for another 6 months from the 1st of January. Now, there is some changes in there from what I've gathered so far. So at the moment, until the end of the year, the maximum loan that we can look at under the scheme was up to £10 million. This has now changed, will change or will come into effect from the 1st of January for a maximum of £2 million. And upon that, the government guarantee is reducing by 10%. So until the end of the year, you've got the lender, let's say, has a guarantee of 80%. From the 1st of January, that's going to be reduced by 10% to 70%. Therefore, there's more risk on the lender to actually loan this money. Now, this then comes on the flip side of how a lender is going to look at potential lending facilities. At the moment, they've got an 80% guarantee. From the 1st of January, they've got a 70% guarantee. Well, how does that fit in with the funders' criteria? We're yet to find out, and we're yet to see kind of the fruition of that. That will probably kind of happen, knowing the way that the market works, probably as January comes, and it'll be an afterthought probably in terms of these lenders. So if there are any clients, or if you have any clients that you're dealing with that potentially are looking to an RLS, what I would say is start to kind of speak potentially with a broker or with Swoop in terms of the actual lending side of what's available now. We are seeing kind of masses of acceptances throughout our kind of clients and really good feedback from them, and lenders are really willing to lend within that. But I suppose it is good news that it has been extended, but what that will look like in terms of the lender's appetite is we're yet to know that until the 1st of January.
Yeah, and I would actually add to that. So it was kind of obvious they were going to extend, but as they do each time, they take away something. So now, of course, is the right time. But if I'm servicing my clients and I'm thinking, okay, well, they've already got CBILS. So what's the difference? What's the benefit of recovery loan scheme, etc.? Well, there are some benefits. So if you have clients who've already dealt with it through CBILS, they are more than likely, well, since last March to the coming March, they're going to enter the period where they're back into full repayments. And so if you take an average facility of, say, 200,000, your client is looking at just, let's say, over £5,000 coming out in repayments once that period kicks in. Or if they refinance, we have some lenders who will refinance in entirety the CBILS. You're looking at about 1,600, 1,700 in repayments, because you get to do interest only for the next 12 months. Now, of course, the capital has to be repaid. We have some lenders who will actually look at a 6-year term. Of course, the capital has to be repaid, but we're still all recovering from COVID. So there's that element of, you know, why should you look at this if you've had a CBILS? The other points I think are around just in general, there might have been clients who got rejected or were on the edge of getting the funding, didn't get the amount that they wanted. And some of that was down to question marks that lenders would have still in their minds. So that affects their appetite in terms of lending. Question marks would have been, are we going to go back into another lockdown? Is this business going to survive? Will it get back to pre-COVID levels, etc.? So what we as a profession need to do to help our clients to become more relevant in terms of lending, putting your best foot forward in terms of your clients is look at things like, have they filed their accounts? They need to file their accounts, even if they're not due for another few months. Get them done, because these things matter to lenders. It draws a line in the sand. It says, okay, now I can tangibly say this was the impact of COVID. The other point as well with RLS is they can look at either the 2019 or the 2020 accounts and take whichever are the stronger. So there's little nuances in there that, of course, Rhys and the team are all looking at to put the best foot forward. But if you're an accountant and you're servicing your clients and they're in that position of either they didn't get it, or they didn't get enough, or they need more, or they need a refinance, then it is a genuinely good scheme. And you always know it's a genuinely good scheme when the high street banks aren't really that into it. and like, they're really not that into it. And you know, if you have clients as well who are speaking to the banks, the difference with RLS is the difference between RLS and the Enterprise Finance Guarantee Scheme that was in place pre-RLS was that with RLS, you have to prove there was a COVID impact, and you have to prove that you couldn't offer any other form of funding. So for banks, it's quite a long process. They have to go through the normal, can I lend to this business in normal circumstances? And if I can't, did this business get impacted by COVID, and therefore does it fall under the RLS scheme? So they've got a lot more red tape to get through than the alternative lenders. So again, hoping clients don't get despondent if that's the types of conversations they're having to go through and they're feeling like it's not getting them anywhere. There's just key little nuances like that the team at Swoop will be focused on for your clients.
Can I just add one thing on the property front as well in relation to RLS? So there are a handful of lenders. RLS was quite different to CBILS in that RLS was a little bit more open to interpretation in comparison to what CBILS was. So we have a handful of lenders who will fund acquisitions of trading businesses where they fund the property and goodwill and fund it as a going concern, but use the RLS scheme as part of their security suite. So that is also a really useful addition of the scheme. There's only a few lenders of doing it, and as Andrea quite rightly pointed out, the high street banks don't want to do it because it's a little bit too much for them. But there are some other options in the market, and we can gladly navigate that with you and your clients should it be a requirement.
Just to touch on that one, and I know we kind of, Andrea touched on kind of the CBILS and the refinance option of spreading the costs. If there are clients out there who have potentially already explored options on the RLS and have been rejected, during the CBILS period, I suppose the cheapest option of finance was to actually secure a CBILS facility. Now, this was effectively replaced within the market, which would typically have been a asset finance facility for certain companies that potentially have used their funds for growth and expansion. Now, there is the option that if clients out there have not been successful in potentially either refinancing their CBILS facility onto an RLS facility, we can actually flip it onto a asset finance facility, providing that there is an asset in the background to secure it against. Now, there are pros and cons to that, which kind of the Swoop team can explain, but there is more options than refinancing, as Stu's kind of pointed out, on kind of a property, assets, or even an unsecured loan, which is outside of the RLS facility. The whole point, I suppose, is freeing up cash flow within a business. If the monthly repayments are genuinely quite chunky, that then has a cash flow on how that business performs, pay wages, kind of expands, etc. There are other options out there to look at. So that's something that we are definitely well suited to kind of look at.
Cool. And just on the RLS piece and the CBILS, we alluded to the banks earlier that they're not that their appetite is overly high. Is it worth just covering as to why there as well? And because to us in the business it's fairly obvious, and having obviously different lenders that are now offering CBILS like market finance and so on. But is it worth just covering that, because it's kind of probably, I guess the norm is I need funding, I go to my bank. And I know obviously the whole landscape of funding has changed because of the second tier lenders and everything, and the way that actually to move, and increase competition. But is it worth just covering that as to why they don't, why their appetite's not as high? Because essentially what CBILS has done to the banks ultimately.
Yeah, but it's just, there's a number of factors behind this. There's the number of mainly it comes down to the capitalization rules that banks have to follow. So their regulatory requirements are that they have to hold a certain amount of capital on their balance sheet when they lend. We're in a period now where the banks have actually have loan books of bounce back loans that they never would have done in the normal course of business. So you've got to remember they're looking at their balance sheet with that loan book on there, and they're trying to work their way through that and ensuring there aren't a number of defaults. So that's the first thing. The second thing is the banks were used to, when they couldn't lend under normal conditions, they would lend under the Enterprise Finance Guarantee Scheme. And they were really pretty poor at distributing that scheme, which is essentially what RLS is. And it's why the bank, or the British Business Bank, decided to accredit way more lenders in these schemes, the COVID schemes, than they did waiting for the banks to distribute them. So the banks' hands are quite tied in this. So the RLS rules state that you can only use it if you cannot lend under your normal lending criteria. So for a bank, they are constantly lending under normal criteria. And so they can only look at RLS as a default. So time-wise, they have to go through the process of, are you eligible under our normal lending rules? And if you're not, we'll lend under RLS. Now, that's very different to the alternative loan market. The alternative lenders are not lending any other products other than the RLS scheme. So they automatically can tick that box of, well, we can't lend under any other scheme. So there's more freedom for the alternative lenders in the market now than there are for the high street banks. And the other point is, the guys are saying, it's not just about RLS. Banks for the last, decade, your larger growth clients probably are struggling to get the normal senior debt levels that they would have achieved 10, 20 years ago when I was in corporate finance. Those levels of senior debt are not there now. And so that's why Swoop has products on our marketplace. We originate a BNP Paribas loan, which sits alongside senior debt of banks, because we're trying to fill the gaps that the banks are leaving now in the market. And as I say, this isn't bank bashing. They have to follow the capitalization rules of the regulator, and they do have things to work through themselves. So it's just the new reality that we live in.
Yeah, fantastic. And
can I chip in with that as well, just off the back of that? I actually think the banks have a much lower headcount in terms of people to service SMEs and property professionals now. As a result, it's more difficult. I come across businesses that are turning over 5, 10, 20 million quid, and they don't have a relationship manager. So they don't know where to go to access finance, which invariably either leads them to their accountant or it leads them to an intermediary of some sort to access that market. And that's the gap that we're filling. And I think the opportunity for us as a business and for accountants and other professionals is that as banks continue to reduce that headcount on the front line, it just provides us with a greater opportunity to make sure clients are accessing the finance that they require.
Well, this is case in point, isn't it? I did 10 years of relationship relationship manager in banking, and I'm sat here. You've both worked in banks. We're here, so yeah, I guess that is the spill out, isn't it? Which is only to benefit everyone. There's some questions that have actually come in, and I'm going to cover those first, just because they're in relation to the topic we're discussing. So Kevin has asked, will banks look at a forecast for a recovery loan or just the historic numbers, i.e. if the business model is changing as a result of COVID and needs capital to reorganize and invest to change the business model. So will they advance loans based on the forecast as well as the historic accounts?
Do you want me to go? Yeah. So the banks will. Each bank has a separate criteria, and it's how you interpret the scheme. So some banks will look at the forecasted projections view, and there are more that are being accredited kind of over the last couple of months who are looking kind of forward rather than backwards in terms of the 2019 annual accounts and how that seems. So that is definitely an option. It is a case-by-case scenario, and it's not a blanket rule for every business for me to say, yeah, we can definitely get that facility. It's a case of, speaking with myself, a funding manager, discussing the options and then presenting it to the bank that or funder that we would deem most applicable for, given the credit criteria. But to answer the question, yeah, definitely that they can look at kind of forecasted projections.
Fantastic. I think anywhere where there's a story to be told and it passes the common sense test, that's primarily what our role is when we're working with clients, is to build that story, build that picture, make it and present it as best as we can to give the client the best opportunity of getting the approval that they need. Fantastic.
And Kevin has asked another question as well. Thank you, Kevin, for putting these through. I have a client who has an extensive asset finance in place. I think it was expensive asset finance in place, backed by a CBILS. Can we swap out for a recovery loan backed asset finance deal, as we want to switch assets to a holding company and we'll lose the current CBILS backed finance?
That's a bit of it is doable. In terms of the holding company, it's where those assets would then sit. So it's who effectively owns those assets and where the debt's being repaid. Under the scheme, it will have had to be kind of trading during pre-COVID to show that it wasn't in any kind of financial difficulty. So that is available. It is possible, but again, unless seeing kind of the criteria in terms of numbers and levels, then that is available. We do have our own product, which Andrea touched on before, which sounds like that might fit the case depending on debt quantum. So we do have our own, I suppose, link in with BNP Paribas on that, which potentially could fit that criteria. So if you want to pick up with me afterwards, then I can share my details with you following the call, definitely.
Yeah, and I think crucially on the product that Rhys is talking about there, the BNP Paribas one, it is unsecured. Unsecured finance with an 8-year repayment term. So it's a really lovely product, and the amounts go from 500,000 to 5 million. So it's really filling that gap that exists once you've almost kind of maxed out on, RLS, CBILS, etc. It only covers a certain amount for you before you're into personal guarantees. So that is a really nice option, one that Rhys can look at for Kevin for sure.
Fantastic. And the final one that we have around CBILS and bounce backs, actually, but relation to RLS, I think we've pretty much answered this, but I'm going to cover it just to ensure that we've covered it. Should businesses look to extend CBILS, bounce back loans, repayment terms where possible due to the low rates? I think there's an answer. There's two different answers there, isn't there? Which I
would say again, and I know it is a case-by-case scenario. So until you have the live picture of what is the client's paying, because I've done CBILS rates at really kind of low end, and also the opposite end, depending on kind of the criteria and where the client's at. It really does depend on what the client's vision is and what the lend's for, and also the security against it, and the affordability moving forward. So I think that question is I would say it's an individual question based on the business behind it that we can answer. We would just need to kind of look at the details completely before we'll be able to give you a full answer, I would say.
Yeah. And I guess also just to give a generic sort of, if it was me type thing, not seeing the numbers, but if you're talking about bounce back loans, you're never going to get 2.5% interest rate ever again, right? So if you think the refinance is going to lead to cheaper finance from a bounce back, that isn't going to happen. However, if you are now in a situation where your bounce back loan repayments have kicked in and you're looking at your cash flow and you're saying, I could do with another year of interest only or whatever it is, or a longer term, or I need further funding, etc. That's where you'd start to look at the other schemes, whether it's for refinance or whether it's for additional funding that you need subject to affordability. So on the civils front, yeah, it's always worth, I mean, absolutely. If it was me, if I had a civils, I would be basically seeing, can I get a better deal for myself? Can I improve my cash flow? Why not? It's available. So if I'm doing right by my client or it's in my business, 100%, what's there to lose? But on bounce back, I would say, if you're looking for better APR, it's never going to exist in the world again.
And if you do find it, let us know.
Yeah.
We'll get it on our lenders.
I got 2.55 above base for a client yesterday. Close, but not quite there. Just to sort of add on to that end bit, cash is king, always has been, always will be. If you can keep the cash in the business, then to me it would make sense to try and extend the terms if you can, because that then frees up capital to either look or grow or expand the business. It just makes sense as far as I'm concerned to do that.
Yeah, and just when we thought we'd got off RLS, a question has come in about RLS, so we may as well cover it at the same time. Rohan, it's a valid question actually, and I hope we have the answer. If an RLS loan is approved before 31st of December 2021, will the 80% guarantee be in place for the lenders for the period of the facility?
Yes, providing that it's drawn down, funds are in the client's account before that date, I would suspect that is the case. So, for example, any loan that's happened kind of this year will remain with the 80% guarantee. Moving on from the 1st of January, it will go down to kind of the 70%, but that's purely on the funder's kind of ballot, the funder's liability, not necessarily the client's kind of risk of a personal guarantee, etc., providing that it does fit under the £250,000 threshold.
Okay, so do we expect
to see lenders in that case then, Rhys, having a bit of a end of year rush to try and get deals over the line so they get the 80% guarantee rather than the 70%?
I would suspect so. I mean, if you put yourself in your shoes as a lender, if you could lend money out with a government guarantee at 80% rather than a day later or a month later at 70, I know which one I will be doing. So yeah, definitely, I think there will be a rush. Likewise, with these rushes, which sounds a bit kind of comical, the funders aren't necessarily equipped with the backlog. So if there is a sudden rush of applications, I can guarantee they'll try their best to get it through before the end of the year. But what I would say is, with it being Christmas as well, I wouldn't necessarily wait until the 15th of December to say, right, well, yeah, I've got 2 and a bit weeks now. Let's try and get this through, because they are not equipped to kind of have a massive rush of influx of applications. So my advice would be to kind of look at it, in November, with drawing down before the end of the year, if that's an option, definitely.
So basically, I'm gonna hold the two of you, Stuart and Rhys, on this call now. You are happy for every person who is on this webinar to send through any CBILS cases that they have to review. Can I get that commitment from you?
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic.
100%. That's right.
Exactly. That's fine. So yeah, get flood gates have opened, and yes, please, genuinely, and I think it's probably fair to say as well, and the guys will agree, that just any case is worth discussing, genuinely is, because as back to that point that Rhys was saying earlier, we have so many different lenders that have so many different ways of working and quirks and criteria and things that they actually get excited about. So where it might not be suitable for the bank currently, there's a load of other lenders that will entertain, and obviously it's got to be what's right for the business as well. But we will always on 99% of the time have an option for them. And on that, just thinking about the when we talk about options that are available for small businesses, we've obviously spoke a lot about debt here, but one of the questions that came through was related to the budget, and a lot of the innovation that Rishi spoke about yesterday, And I guess, Andrea, can you just give us a bit more of an update on
Yeah.
that side of things?
Sure. It was typical budget theatrics yesterday. I always think be careful of the headlines, because that's not actually where the truth lies. The truth lies in the finer detail. So we're going through it with a tooth comb and actually analysing a lot of questions that I haven't had answered yet. Some of them in relation to grants, actually, that was not spoken about yesterday. And I'll move on to tax credits in a second. But for 3 years now, we've been waiting for the government replacement of the European Regional Development Funding, which essentially ran out in the last 6 months. So we're waiting for this infamous Prosperity Fund to be announced by the government. And some of it has been alluded to for sure under the levelling up agenda. But really, we need to start seeing that kicking into action. So that's the finer detail I'll be reading on that. In terms of the R&D tax credits, pluses and minuses from the announcement. So the pluses are that they've increased they've expanded the definition of R&D spend to include data and cloud computing. Which are super expensive items in your R&D, and we can, as Swoop, totally attest to that. But here is a little caveat that was in there that actually will negatively impact businesses, well, all of us actually who carry out R&D, but especially if you've got life science clients. So the other point in there was the R&D spend has to take place within the UK. Now, that's very difficult for some sectors. The facilities are just simply not here for life sciences. It's a global effort in terms of innovation and biotech. So I don't think that sector will be too happy with yesterday's announcement. So, I mean, the trajectory the government is going down is focusing the UK on becoming the beacon of innovation. So, as I said, some good, like every budget, there's the Peter and the Paul moment of who's he taking from, who's he giving to, and so for me, that's kind of the main story of R&D tax credits. Good in general in terms of the additions of the definition, bad in terms of it will reduce R&D tax credit claims where not all of the spending happens in the UK. The other element, of course, in general, is just, I suppose, on the grant side, is that they are genuinely investing more in the innovation side of things. So I suppose if I was to say, if there was ever one thing that Dominic Cummings got right, well, whoever thought they'd say that statement, it was probably his push trying to get the government to be ambitious on innovation. So UKRI and Innovate UK getting more commitment to funding, introducing new programs for scale up. We've just had 2 clients approved on the Innovate Edge program, an absolutely brilliant program. If you've got clients who are scaling up, it's not just funding, it's the support around it as well. So there are some really good new schemes on that front. On the local regional side of things, as I said, there have been announcements on further grants out into the regions, but still waiting for that big ticket item to replace the European Regional Development Funding. But on Swoop, whatever funding is there, when the competitions are open, you will see those available for your clients, because grant funding works on a first come, first served basis. For the way grant funding works is it's local and regional, and then you have national. National is purely innovation focused. Local and regional is about first come, first served basis. And usually all the data that you've compiled to go for a loan or for anything else is pretty much what the grant agency want to see. So for example, on basic terms, business normally needs to be trading for 2 years. There's COVID recovery grants, there's capital grants for, if you're going for asset finance, where we could look at getting the deposit via the capital grant. There's revenue grants, you've got to buy a new software, invest in a new website, maybe pivot to being an e-commerce business. So those pockets exist, and it's about knowing when they're there, so you can get your clients in there first. So that's, I suppose, the other key one. And then, of course, the other big push, as I said, is equity investment, and the British Business Bank and the government really trying to push the agenda of more regional equity investment. And what they're looking for, actually, there's a big push to really reach out to accountancy firms, because they believe that as professionals, we are the gatekeepers to those investable businesses. And how do we deploy those equity investment funds into regional SMEs? Because the numbers show if you have external investment into SMEs, UK SMEs, productivity substantially increases. So it's a really big push. And again, we have those investors on Swoop, all the British Business Bank funds, as well as all of the other private funds that exist. So I'm really hoping that the accountancy profession really gets behind this. There are fees to be earned to getting your businesses, clients, investor ready, etc. So yeah, a lot of exciting things in the budget and the general government policy for 2022 for SMEs.
Fantastic. And actually, there's two questions that will follow on from to this as well. Rohan has asked, do you support both RDEC and patent box applications?
Oh, yes. Patent, but very, very similar. So absolutely. Patent box is fantastic and really underutilized facility. And so for anyone who doesn't quite know, it's essentially if you are a business that has an IP strategy, and so achieving patents is kind of a must-have on your roadmap as a business. Patents are very expensive to get and very expensive to maintain. And so you really kind of need to think about, well, how do I get the return on investment for my business around patents? And so patent box is, if you have a patent granted or pending status, even within one territory, so it could be UK only, then you can avail of 10% corporation tax rate on the profits generated from that IP. And again, it's a very similar process to the R&D tax credit application process. So yes is the answer, and I think it's one that we need to shout about more.
Okay, fantastic. And Rohan actually asked another question at the same time. Please provide a bit more detail into the regional equity financing schemes Andrea mentioned.
Yeah, so yesterday, the government announced a further 150 million to go out to regional angel investment investors. So what used to happen was everything would be centered around London, and then they realized actually entrepreneurialism is the best way to start leveling up. So they've started to devolve a lot of the British Business Bank funds out into the regions. And so what they do is they look for private sector funds or organizations or networks that can help them deliver that funding. So for example, in this 150 million, the detail is yet to be like completely understood, but I know from previous ones how it works is they look for angel investor groups or funds. So for example, the Milton Keynes Angel Investor Group, the Dorset Business Angels, etc., the Startup Funding Club. And what they do is they come in on a co-fund basis. Now that has existed in London for years, and it's very, very powerful, because a lot of the time angel investors are constrained. They're normally looking at, well, I can give 50,000 or 10,000, etc. And a business needs more funding than what they can raise under an angel round. The government are now coming in on a matched fund basis, and specifically designed towards the regions. The other way the government's deploying equity investment funds is through, you will have heard of the Northern Powerhouse, the Midlands Engine Investment Fund. So for example, the Midlands Engine Investment Fund got another 400 million committed yesterday. So they're beginning to see that it works. And so what I always say is when I hear of a client that's joined Swoop, or an accountant comes to us with a client looking, I always say, right now you have a competitive advantage if you're in the regions and you're looking for funding. Because if you imagine, if you're looking for investment on a normal day and you're from Birmingham, let's say, you'd be up against every other business in the country. Well, now you're only up against every other business in the Midlands. So the likelihood of success has just improved significantly. The other good point about the British Business Bank funded funds like the Midlands Engine Investment Fund is they have to respond. They have to respond within a time period. They have performance criteria they have to meet. Now, normally you'd be waiting for a VC fund to come back to you I don't know, depends on the day they're having or the week or the month they're having. Whereas under this scheme, you're getting a response. So we have them all onboarded onto Swoop. We have great relationships with them. We also, if you want to help your client or your client wants to get investor ready, we have all of the templates. We have advisors, equity specialists within the team who can review the investor deck, the financial model, and tell you how best to get yourself ready to put your best foot forward. As Stuart says, it's always about building the story to put that forward to a funder who actually wants stories and businesses like that. So really, I think it's an exciting area for accountants to start looking at getting into for their clients.
Thank you. And Kevin has just come in, and it's a perfect plug for us here, Andrea. How do we find out more of government support for equity investment? Regional investment, East Midlands and Scotland, very interested in match funding.
Yes. Well, www.swoopfunding.com. No joke, but I mean, yes, first of all, you'll see them on the platform, but apart from that, like, the whole ethos of Swoop is the platform and the technology is there to do the low value, heavy lifting of admin, but we couple that with experts like Stu, Rhys, and equally so on our equity team and equally so on our grants team. For me, it's about quality of expertise and freeing up that expertise via technology to deliver to our accountants and to our SMEs. So anything you want to learn, we have a knowledge hub also on Swoop. If you can have a read through that through your leisure, and if you register, you tell us what areas you're interested in, and we'll bring you up to speed every single month on what's happening and what we can do to help you.
Fantastic. And
I think that's one really key message about what the people do in the background. We're not order takers. We don't just, you want a Diet Coke, right, let's provide you a Diet Coke. We actively work with clients to understand what their needs are and provide tailored solutions. It's not just a one-size-fits-all approach and a quick signpost. We get involved with clients. So, just getting that message across is quite important. We will get to know them on an individual basis to what makes the business tick and why they need what they need, and then our experts will provide the solutions.
Yeah, and I have to say, I know it's me asking the questions, but I can attest that as well. I was dealing with an accountant who's a corporate finance accountant, and came to us with a case that looked like they were just looking for some SEIS, and actually went away with probably about 4 different products, but the 4 different solutions, which actually meant that they kept a lot more of their equity, and actually it was a much more affordable solution for them. And it was just, for me, it was a masterclass. It was just like, okay, wow, this, to see what we can do for each individual business and actually support them in a much better way than they first anticipated. It was, blew me away anyway. So
I think just on that, I think we are obviously a one-stop shop for an SME, but we have individual specialisms, and that's all we focus on. So we will be we will get the client the best of each product as they go through the journey. And I think that's one key thing about kind of what we bring to the table or offering to a client. And no matter what point of the journey they're on, whether it's a big corporate that's been trading over hundreds of millions, or it's really, a new start looking to open up a bank account. I think that's where we can really kind of be on the journey all the way through kind of the cycle of the business.
Yeah, exactly. And there was a question that also came in, which came back to what Andrea alluded to about there's fees to be earned. One of the questions that's asked, I guess it's an honest and open question. Do you work with introducers, i.e. pay a commission? I know you're brokers, but I have a model that secured me a commission for introductions.
The answer is absolutely yes. The point of this is to make this a very relevant proposition for accountants on the advisory side. That's what I did for a living, and I wouldn't expect anyone to be doing this for free. So we work alongside you. You earn your introducer commission, absolutely, as you've just said. You've probably worked with others in the past. You absolutely earn your introducer's commission, which we share with you when you onboard, etc. But the other point as well is, yes, you can earn commission, but there's also genuinely value add services that can be given to other businesses who do want to get investor ready, etc. We can walk you through what that looks like, how you could deliver that program to your clients and give them that genuine value add on an investor readiness side of things. The other point as well is we've also got we've talked about the BNP Paribas product that is unsecured. You can imagine it's unsecured lending up to 5 million over 8 years. What they're looking for is good governance, good management, and part of their criteria is that there must be involvement from advisors with a client, and they want to see that involvement in terms of the client is following a really in-depth cash flow forecast, that once the loan is given, that there's monitoring there. So if you can imagine, if you secure that funding for your client, you're securing a service for yourself for 8 years of helping them stay on top of their forecasts, ensuring that they're in line, or if they're not in line, looking at the monitoring side of that. So lots of other opportunities. And I think it's a really exciting time for the profession. I think we really are at this tipping point, and I see it more and more every day, where advisory is becoming a big part of our firms now. And but then how do we get there? How do we deliver it in a way that we ethically and genuinely can say hand on heart we're delivering value to our clients? And I think that's where those elements come in from earning fees perspective.
Yeah, and on that, the whole advisor piece, and how do we ensure that we engage with our accountants in the right way to give the small businesses the support they need? That is absolutely, my one. If there's one commitment that I need to give to Swoop and our accountants is that, we will be that gel between the two, and ensuring that we can work as close as we can with you, give you the education and support that you need to ensure that this is being delivered in the right way to your clients. And you can do this for every client, regardless of size, shape, whatever however they're built out. As Rhys said, it might be the wanting a bank account to start the business, which is great, but actually it might be that they're wanting something more complex further down the line. We have that ability to do that, and it's really is about keeping them within the platform and at whatever stage they're at, and for us to help identify opportunities for you as well, and for that client to say, hey, actually we can see that there's this facility here, but how potentially we've been looking at, actually there might be something else we can do for them, or have you looked into this area, or are they on track from the forecast that you've created? Actually they're above it, they're exceeding, great, actually means that we need to buy that warehouse 6 months before. And that's where we genuinely are, or I see Rhys and Stu and the teams as they are that, we are that sounding board as well, to say, okay, yes, this is the right decision, and this is actually what we can do for you. Or have you thought about this? Back to that example earlier.
Yeah, I guess just one other last quick point. I know when I started out, I wanted to understand the professional guidelines and to understand, am I able to deliver this type of service to my clients? Do I need to be regulated, etc.? And so I think it's good to point out that we are partners of the Institute of Chartered Accountants for England and Wales, and we have gone through. They've actually worked with us, the compliance team at the ICAW, where we have actually written the templates for client engagement letters, etc., so that you fall under the DPP guidelines, etc. So this is something that they are also very much supporting. We've more webinars coming up with them to really get the word out there. So again, if these are question marks in your head, know that we've had those question marks, we've had them answered, and we have the wording templates, etc., for you to be able to engage with your clients.
Zoe from ICAW, nice ICAW shout out. So glad to hear you like it, Zoe. Great to hear. So we've got literally 6 minutes left. I have got quite a few questions to run through, but I'm going to pick a couple out. Now, one of them, an interesting question, and it might be an Andrea answer, considering it's got an accountant spin on it. But how do you ensure that SME balance sheets are reported fairly? I don't like doing that, but that's how it's stated in a post-audit world.
Right, how long do we have? We could run a lecture on that one. I mean, look, at the end of the day, I think we reported as we would have reported it in normal circumstances. They may be referring to the going concern basis. And it's kind of, well, you could say, is every business subject to a going concern opinion after COVID because their balance sheet's been hit or their trading has been hit? But I think we have to see it in the overall. I know myself, I sit on some boards, and we have asked this question about the balance sheet and the going concern opinion with auditors from all over. And essentially it's saying, in the main, you know, we all probably have an element of, well, are we a going concern, etc., or are we an undertaking in difficulty? But it's more in the main, if we've survived it and we can continue. I think it's about reporting as you did pre-COVID and just outlining the COVID impact, but why it's still a going concern. But as I say, it is a pretty big question that we could all debate. I've debated it for hours at board meetings, so I do know we could have a separate webinar on it.
Yeah. Okay, well there you go. Maybe you got a private one booked in there. But I think going on that, then I guess, is that fair to say that it's back to Stu's point earlier, that it's story. It really is about, yeah.
Yeah, I think it's important to say we're not creating stories out of fresh air. What we're doing is we're looking at the numbers, but the numbers are only part of it. We have lenders that we refer to as storybook lenders. So I would say, do not think, oh, this is a disastrous looking case. If there are stories to be told, like someone pivoted, or, you know, they invested somewhere, need to invest somewhere to get those numbers up again. There's a lot more to lending than just the hardcore numbers. They form a part of it, but that's why Swoop automated that part. It's like, let's get that done, dusted, like that's part of it. Now let's get into the insights and the story part that goes with it.
Okay, fantastic.
I think we're problem solvers, Sam. I think that's what we are. The clients come to us and we provide them with the solutions that are available in the market, and that's where our expertise across the full function and caliber of Swoop works, and we will solve the problem for the client or provide them with an answer.
Okay, fantastic. I'm going to stop the questions now on the basis that we have 3 minutes left, unless anyone has any burning questions they want to fire through. What I want to do now is kind of pitch to the people on this call, on this webinar, or watch the recording. Now, we've run this as an open webinar out to, you know, any advisor, accountant in the land, essentially. But what we're looking to build is more of a roundtable discussions, where we either do them virtually, where everyone will be on the screen. It's a meeting rather than a webinar, or we're going to look to do some hosting ones where it'll be, you know, perhaps a lunch or, you know, or a dinner, whatever. And we want to get and work so close with accountants and advisors to ensure that we can give you the tools that you need to do your job. And again, we learn from what you're doing to ensure that we've got our messaging and the way that we work as, you know, nailed on as a partnership, and truly is a partnership in my mind. You know, it's not you just refer business to us and we give you commission. It's not about that. It's about how can we collectively work, and we only work and grow if we work together. So I mean, actually encouraging, if anybody who's an existing partner of ours, reach out to us, let us know. We will reach out to you after this anyway, but let us know if you want to be part of that. But also, if there's anybody who isn't signed up, as Andrea said earlier, go to swoopfunding.com and register as an advisor. Once you've done that, you will be assigned an account manager, and then we can ensure that you're obviously part of those as well, because we can only do this. You know, we've got the technology and we've got what we think is right, but we can only do this together. Genuinely, it sounds like I feel like a politician or something the way I've said that. You know, I should get some kind of round of applause for that. But genuinely, you know, I'm so keen to build this out, and I know Andrea, Stu, everyone in the business, in fact, is so keen to build this out and ensure. Thank you, Catherine. I knew I'd get your vote on there. I know Catherine already. But yeah, genuinely, you know, if there's anything that you guys have questions asking, you didn't want to ask, you know, drop me a message, samhorner@swoopfunding.com. We will share, obviously, this out and the recording later, but if there's anything that you need, and let us know, was it of interest? You know, actually, I'd like it if you've done this, that, and the other. You know, we're ever evolving, and we'll always listen. If we don't like it, we'll ignore it. No, I'm joking. But genuinely, firstly, thank you for everybody for attending, and secondly, thank you for Stu, Andrea, and Rhys taking the time, because I know it's of value at the minute. But yeah, really enjoyed the session. It's the first. We will do these the last Thursday of every month, and as I say, we will do some closed ones as well for those of you who want something a bit more in detail as well. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your days.
Thanks,
Thank you very much. Bye bye.
Cheers, guys.
Thanks all. Cheers.
Bye bye.